Good evening, everybody. I've actually seen an increase in memes recently, like in the last day. There's been a lot more memes being created, so good job, meme creators. And it's interesting. And again, I frequent places that don't like Justin Trudeau. I'm interested. I don't go on Facebook like ever, so I don't know what the Liberals are saying at this point in time that is like, yeah, Trudeau really did it this time in a positive way. I really don't. I have no idea. But this meme has got Trudeau in the House of Commons, which he hasn't been in the last couple of days. And we're going to see that highlighted in the next clip. But it's got Trudeau in the House. And it says, when charges against Vice Admiral Mark Norman were stayed, Trudeau refused to apologize, blamed Harper, tried to deflect discussion to climate change and economy, left the chamber before a unanimous vote to apologize to Norman, ignored the fact that he publicly suggested the case would end up in the courts before Norman was even charged. Hey, Liberals, we're sick of having this spineless child as Prime Minister. Why aren't you? Really? I'll have a Liberal on. Let's have a discussion. What has Justin Trudeau done that has turned out in a way that you expected? Okay, this is Lisa Raitt asking of the Liberals, and she asks Justin Trudeau, but he's not in the House today because, well, he's Justin Trudeau and he doesn't like to be held accountable. He doesn't like to hear when people don't like or agree with him. So he's not in the House and hasn't been really since the Mark Norman charges were dropped. And, well, we're going to listen to about 2.5 minutes. So here we go. I think they're all worthwhile. It's in French, but it's translated in English. Here we go.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday this House of Commons unanimously stood and agreed and thanked Vice Admiral Mark Norman for his years of service to this country and as well apologized for the treatment over the past 3.5 years. It was reported by some media this morning that unfortunately the Prime Minister wasn't present in the House for that apology, and I'm wondering if he would like to take the opportunity now to apologize himself for the treatment of Vice Admiral Mark Norman.
You're here. Good question.
The honourable member is an experienced member and will know that members are not permitted to draw attention to the presence or absence of a member in the House. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I respect the member opposite for that question, but also for raising that unanimous consent motion in this House. And when it's endorsed by this House, it's endorsed by every member of this House. That's the first point.
I just want to point out, watch his hands now and then compare to the body language when he answers exactly the same talking points, because you can tell because he does exactly the same things with his hands. It's kind of funny actually, but it's just something I noticed. This is probably my third time watching this, but watch his hands. Anyway, here we go.
The second point is that, and this needs to be restated, is that there's three important factors here. The people that decide to lay charges are the independent RCMP officers, whom we respect and I hope all members respect. Second point is that the people that decide to lay charges are the independent Director of Public Prosecutors. And the people that decide to withdraw charges are also the independent DPP.
Honourable member for Milton.
The people that decided to withhold the documents from the defense of Vice Admiral Mark Norman was this government.
That's right.
Plain and simple. Mr. Speaker, it was only because of an abusive process motion brought forward by the Vice Admiral that we started to get a look at the documents that clearly showed that there was political interference in this matter, but we only got to see it after 6 months of fighting in court. Yes, the court had to order the release of these documents because the government said they wouldn't release them. Will they apologize to Vice Admiral Mark Norman?
Full Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, again, now I'm going to speak to everyone in this House, but especially that lawyer opposite who shares some of the same background as I do as Fox scholars in Britain. And what we learned when we were learning and training in Britain is that you respect court processes. The way it works on an O'Connor application for third-party records is you identify the documents. If there are claims of privilege, it goes to the court goes behind the claims of privileges, ascertains whether they are valid or not, and makes a decision. That's how you respect the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary. That's exactly what we did in this case and what we do in every case.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Order, please. Well, yes, precisely. Let's talk about the legal system. Twice, the Prime Minister said that Vice Admiral Norman would end up before the courts before charges had even been laid. First mistake. Second, the PMO kept all the information they could until the court had to order them And that is political interference. Will the Liberal government and his Prime Minister, do what everyone expects, and that is formally apologize to Vice Admiral Norman? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, what I would like to underscore are three things. First thing, the decision to do an investigation is taken by the independent RCMP. The decision to lay charges and have a trial is done by the DPP. And third, the decision to withdraw or stay those charges is also made by the public prosecution. They are independent. And you can even rest assured by these words.
Nor was there any contact or influence from outside the PPSC, including political influence in either the initial decision to prosecute or the decision to stay the charge.
Sorry, I'm going to leave that there. You can watch the whole thing. It's interesting. They get into Phoenix Pay just before this, and Phoenix Pay has been a disaster. Justin Trudeau personally promised. Ha, what a joke, right? So it's interesting that Justin Trudeau will not apologize. Don't expect an apology. I would be shocked if an apology is forthcoming. Justin Trudeau is not one to say sorry. So crazy, crazy world that we live in. And Vancouver Sun is reporting, and the best part of this article is at the end, so stay with me till the end. Vancouver Sun's reporting, quote, BC announces a public inquiry into money laundering. Yay! Somebody's going to start trying to fix the problem. BC's new Democratic government has launched a public inquiry into money laundering, with results expected to land just before the next scheduled provincial election in 2021. Ha. Fail. Anyway, Premier John Horgan announced the decision Wednesday after a cabinet meeting in which his ministers debated the pros and cons of an independent commission of inquiry into how criminal organizations have laundered dirty drug money through the provincial economy. Spoiler alert, it's because there's no regulations, and the regulations that do exist aren't being enforced. That's why it's happening. Back to the article. Quote, we have an obligation to British Columbians to get to the bottom of this, said Horgan. BC Supreme Court Justice Austin Cullen was appointed to the head inquiry to look at the full scope of the money laundering and its effects on real estate, gambling, financial institutions, and other businesses. He'll also study regulatory law enforcement hurdles. And the inquiry will look at the broad scope of the problem and give us answers about who knew what and when, and tell British Columbians who exactly is participating in and profiting from money laundering in our province, said Attorney General David Eby. Cullen will be given the power to compel witnesses and order that documents be disclosed. It's also clear that some individuals have refused to participate in our reviews voluntarily, said Eby. We are done with asking nicely. Today, our government has given Justice Cullen the authority to do more than ask for voluntary participation. I'm going to pause here for a minute. I wonder if the criminals who get entrapped or whatever in Mr. Cullen's web will do whatever they can, including saying that it's not legal what they've done, and all the evidence that he's collected needs to be thrown out. I wouldn't be surprised, like based on everything that I've seen in the last 5 years on money laundering, I wouldn't be surprised if this is just to vacuum up the rest of the money laundering that they're doing and then get it all packaged up and dismissed from court nice and easy in 2021 just before the election, so they can say, look, we cleaned up money laundering. I don't know. Anyway, back to the article. I'm just speculating there. Back to the article. Cullen will be able to apply for court orders to enter private property and seize records if necessary. Anyone who does not cooperate could be found in contempt of court, said Eby. I'm just wondering what kind of precedent they have for this. Like, if it's not a full like a public inquiry is an investigation. But again, I'm worried that it's so slippery and the regulations are so bad that they're going to use this as a tool to get out of exactly this. So that's my prediction. That's exactly what I think is going to happen. They're going to say, after this 2.5 year long investigation, that they're announcing, like, hey, by the way, guys, if you've got money laundering happening in BC, probably move it to somewhere else because they're starting to do their investigation. So, there's a bunch of other provinces with exactly the same lax rules that aren't doing this. So, hey, here's a newspaper article to signal you to move, right? But the point is, it's going to take so long that really, what are they going to do? Are they even stopping the bleeding? Again, the piece de resistance is at the end of this article. So I'm going to get there. And I know I keep going off on tangents, but here we are. Okay, Horgan said recent reports have shown money laundering is much worse than was expected, and the province deserves answers into what has happened. An interim report is due within 18 months and a final report by May 2021. Okay, so a year and a half and then 2021. Yeah, okay, sure. a year and a half, and then 6 months after that. Right. The BC election is scheduled for October 2021. The timing of this, the timing of it, said Horgan. He added, Cullen will not be constrained in any way in terms of how far back he can investigate or the scope of who he calls as witnesses. Yeah, right. What kind of precedent do you have for that? I believe the British Columbians want to know how this was allowed to happen in British Columbia, said Horgan. Quote, the commissioner is not constrained in terms of his timelines. He can go as far back as he needs to get answers for British Columbians. This is about making sure there is accountability. If that scope goes back to the 1990 NDP government, it would be prepared to waive any cabinet privileges or documents to make them public, said Horgan. The NDP has called on the previous Liberal government to do the same, but it has refused. Quote, we are not constraining the commissioner in any way, said Horgan. Quote, I will say the gaming in the 90s was a shadow of what we see today in terms of the magnitude of the betting limits and scale and places to launder money, but we're not afraid of that at all. Evie said Cullen will not be constrained by the 2-year timeline. If he needs more time and resources to conduct the job, Cullen can also ask government to amend his terms of reference and scope if he wishes, said Eby. I scroll down just a little bit. The NDP government is debating internally for months whether to call a public inquiry. Eby said he's also received an offer of support from Federal Minister Bill Blair, while Horgan said he's received assurances from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Quote, the federal government will cooperate with us as required in this important work, said Eby. The terms of reference for the inquiry include, quote, the extent, growth, evolution, and methods of money laundering in the following sectors, which include gambling and horse racing, real estate, luxury goods, legal and account servicing, financial institutions, and any other agencies. It also instructed recommendations into regulating any sectors affected by money laundering, as well as barriers to law enforcement and any powers or duties needed to crack down on the problem. It also requires Cullen to forward any information to the appropriate agencies if he believes that any evidence points to criminal code infractions, while specifying that the inquiry is not to jeopardize any continuing criminal investigation. I scroll down. It also, I highlighted that because I thought if it's in the courts now, nobody can talk about it, right? Like, so it can't be a hot button political issue because, it's before the courts, so they're just going to shut that down, which is what the Liberals tried to do with SNC and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know. I think maybe the NDP want to get to the bottom of it as well, but at the same time, it's been going so long and it has inflated the economy so much, you almost are disincentivizing for fixing it because it's going to pop a bubble, right? You're going to see your property prices decrease by, a good percentage. $5 billion is not a small amount of money, right? And I mean, maybe when the houses are $1 million houses like in BC, maybe it's a smaller amount, but still $1 billion is $1 billion. And a house in BC still costs, $7 million, right? Like that's a small percentage of the $1 billion, right? So, right, back to the article. BC has also had to weigh whether Ottawa would participate in an inquiry because the reports have shown much of the blame potentially lies with toothless federal regulators, a lack of shared data, understaffed federal police units, and decisions by federal prosecutors. So it's largely a federal problem because the feds are underfunded, overworked, and can't do the job that is in front of them. And so they don't. And so people just money launder away. And rule of law. Man, I think that's going to be the Reagan-esque, Nixonian thing from this disastrous administration of Trudeau, right? The rule of law, because they go around braying it like donkeys, but it means nothing, right? It means absolutely nothing when garbage like this is allowed. And I'm only looking at it from one lens right now. I'm looking at it strictly from real estate. It's clearly having an impact, clearly. And I mean, what's the breaking point? At what point are people absolutely sick of this? Wow. I reached it months ago. So, yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.